about water and urban places. This is Ideanthro. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Ideanthro. If you've been a viewer for a while, you would have seen me on quite a few of these videos come out to sites and look at sites where weed control isn't quite working right. And in particular, some of the issues with sites where we're using herbicide to manage them. We're seeing sites that where, with all the best intentions, weeds are allowed to establish, they get sprayed a little, you get bare patches, which favors the weeds to come back in, and you kind of get locked up in the cycle of inappropriate weed management. For a while, on that basis, I have been interested in the concept of weed management using steam or hot water, and Jeremy, I'll let you explain the context of that in a second. So I've come out today, I'm in Sydney. Jeremy Weiner from Weed Technics has kindly allowed me to come out, see a little bit of what you guys do, just so I can get an understanding of weed control with steam. There's no agenda to this episode. This episode isn't a, hey, you should be doing it this way, but this is a, look, let's see what this stuff looks like and have a chat about it. So Jeremy, welcome along.
Thank you very much.
Why don't you tell me a little bit about like where we are and what it is you guys do, and then we can go from there and explore the details.
All right. Well, we're at a stormwater detention area right next to a hospital out at Campbelltown, and it's a really high-profile area as far as visual amenity goes, but it's also a very functional area as far as stormwater management goes. Historically, probably over the last 20 years that I've been involved with stormwater catchment, there's been a movement towards natural revegetation around these stormwater areas, and it's very typical for them to be managed by the landscape contractor for a very low budget and then be handed over to the council. Now, during that time, it's not unusual for the landscape to actually take a bit of a step back during establishment, or to be handed over with these large bare areas because of the overspray that occurs when you use sort of glyphosate based herbicide. When we took over this site, it was literally chest high in a few species that are resistant to herbicide now in the Sydney Basin area, typically Canadian fleabane and Pelletoria, and or Biddens pilosa, which is the what did you call it? Farmer's friend, cobbler's peg.
Cobbler's pegs is what I know.
Yeah, farmer's
it as.
friend sticks to you.
Yep.
Okay.
So this site here, like we can see behind us, so this is some desirable vegetation, but now there's these bare patches that have been mulched. So when you came here, the desirable veg was there, but then there were these big patches full of weeds in amongst it.
Which really detracted from the presentation standards. So as far as presentation standards go, people look at an area and it's the weeds they tend to see as not as a feature, but that's what they judge it by. So if
it's funny you say that. I won't distract this conversation with it, but I did an episode recently about some of the cognitive biases of how even when we're looking at stuff that's good and bad, how we often only see the bad. But anyway, go on. So
much better to have open mulched areas than to have weeds. So when we came to this area, we were given this challenge, and we don't use chemicals to take over this area and bring it back into an area that looked much more maintained. We targeted and we used a combination of methods. We used whippersnippers, we used hand weeding, but those two methods are good mechanical processes. But if you want to give a delayed response from the weed, then hitting it with hydrothermal weed control puts heat into those growing areas of the weed where it's going to regenerate from. The weeds are not adapted to it because there's nothing like it in nature. Nothing imitates hot water at boiling point penetrating into those meristematic cells. So we get a residual.
So from a management point of view, for this site in particular, you've come in, it had high weedy vegetation in it. Used a combination of like brush cutting and hand removal, and then started to follow up with weed, with the steaming
in the same process, because hand weeding is great for the tall weeds, because you can immediately improve the presentation standard by pulling them out, get the roots out, drop them where they lie, being careful with the seed bank, and in this case we had broad areas where we could stack them and then steam them.
Gotcha.
Okay, and that starts the decomposition
Yeah.
process and either denatures or germinates the seeds.
Yeah, but for the small
Small
weeds,
stuff.
you don't
Yeah.
want to be pulling it by hand,
No,
because you're going to
you-
be like that one, that one.
Whereas
and-
we can cover large areas using our 60 centimetre head.
yeah. So essentially,
very quickly.
so what you're advocating is essentially a combined a process that combines the best multiple mechanisms in the same way that even someone who would be using herbicide, if they're doing this well, should be using multiple mechanisms
course,
as
yeah,
well.
yeah.
But then you are trying to replace the herbicide element of that
Yes.
with the weeds,
Yes,
the
yeah.
steaming
Yeah.
element of that.
And eliminating all that off-target damage, herbicide resistance, translocation of the chemicals or toxins into the watercourse.
So tell me a little bit about the actual weed, the steaming process.
Steaming
so I saw you
process,
guys
yeah.
doing it before.
Yes.
Saw Ben, your
Yeah.
man, doing it. Tell me a little bit about how that actually, what happens.
All right. So the steam you see is really just for effect.
Okay.
It's a byproduct of the boiling water that we're applying to the weeds.
Okay.
So the challenge for us in developing the technology that we have was that we started with steam back in 1997, and it took about 4 seconds per weed to encapsulate enough steam inside of basically a cup head to steam a weed
Okay.
in order to get some residual control. And then we went to a hot water machine, which heated the water in a boiler, but by the time it had travelled down the pipe to the applicator head, which was only 15 metres away from the boiler, the water had boiled down to or had cooled down to about 96, 90 degrees, depending upon the day. And so it was used a lot of water, and we were cooking the weeds slowly. So that's called lethal heat. Any temperature above about 60 degrees is lethal to plant material if it's
Okay.
applied for long enough.
Yes.
But the real challenge was in being able to work further away from the machine, but also getting a faster kill
Okay.
with less resources.
Yep.
And so how do we get the boiling water at the head? And what we had the epiphany was, well, if we superheated the water by heating it above boiling point without it boiling, and maintain that pressure all the way through the system by creating a small orifice and then expanding it in a decompression chamber, we could then get the boiling water at the weed, which is what we do.
Yeah.
So we get a flash point, and it sounds like an espresso machine. Okay, so you can hear that change now.
Yeah.
So that's now superheating the water and then flashing it into saturated steam and boiling water. Full temperature, you heard that.
Yeah, but then the steam that you actually see coming off the outside, it's not
just for effect.
It's just it's just it leaving
Yeah.
the system essentially.
Yeah.
So you've got this superheated water. It's at the nozzle. You've got a few different types of applicators, and Ben walks around and applies it directly to the weed.
Exactly. So we choose the applicator head depending upon the type of situation we're working in. So this is what I would call a revegetation type or a land care type of situation, and we like the extra volume that the SW900 gives us. It's about 10 litres of water a minute.
Okay.
In farming situations, in organic farming situations, we use more water, but we use much wider heads,
Okay.
because we're generally treating much smaller weeds at an earlier stage.
Gotcha.
Whereas in a hard surface, cracks and crevices situation, we only use 5 litres of water a minute. We concentrate that.
But
so
it's very direct, because you're in the corner of a curb and it's just right there.
Exactly.
One of the potential benefits that I see with this, and I would need to, and I would love to do this actually at some point, to be able to follow a site where this method was being used, so I could see it evolve over time in my own eyes, because it's my first time seeing it. But one of the potential benefits I see is that the problem with herbicide is overspray, amongst other things, is the sense that you have a weed
Off-target damage.
Exactly. You have a weed here, you have a desirable plant here, you apply the herbicide, but you accidentally get this plant. So what we see over time is you might currently have, a small gap between the plants, but over time there's this creep that seems to occur where you just accidentally, even over a period of multiple years, people are knocking off the desirable plants. So in this particular case, the dianellas over there behind you might slowly creep back over time.
Yes.
The steam is different though, because despite the effect of the steam going absolutely everywhere, you can essentially put your hand right next to it and there's no
anything
no
on
heat.
the outside of the applicator head is not affected. Even if it comes up in contact with the applicator head, that's radiant heat, and it's a very poor transfer of heat. So we can work right up underneath the desirable vegetation. We work with organic farmers and go up against their lettuce. And the radiant heat doesn't affect.
Well, if anything was going to wilt a lettuce, would be it.
Exactly.
And so that for me is the potential benefit. What I'd like to be able to follow over time is to see that, and to be able to see that. Oh, okay. If that creep, because if that creep doesn't happen, then for me that's like this is important, because you can come to a site and it's like, well, the good veg is at this point now. I'm going to manage the weeds in this spot, and then we have a chance to revegetate that, as opposed to actually losing it the other direction slowly. And
one of the other benefits that is the only residual that we leave is water. So when we've hit the vegetation, it's exploded the cells, it's already started the composition process, or the decomposition process, so that becomes humus very quickly. So it actually increases microorganism activity. We've applied a bit of heat, a bit of water, and the vegetation, which is the undesirable vegetation, is left to decompose, which then starts the cycle of nutrient replenishment within the soil. If you apply a herbicide, just perpetuating a problem, and so you are eliminating the weed, but you're not assisting in the vegetation, the desirable vegetation, to grow into that space.
And that's why we get stuck in this perpetual cycle of spray, the few herbicide resistant, really tough weeds come back up, they look ugly, you spray again, and you start. So the $100 million question is cost of this sort of thing.
Sure.
Right, because the reality is I suspect that the reason that we use so much herbicide is that, at least in the short term, where the goal is there is a weed, remove that weed. Herbicide is very cheap in that narrow band. Talk to me about how steam management of weeds compares to that, both in terms of like that narrow focus, but also a more holistic focus.
Sure. As far as inputs, it's a lower cost, because the input is water and some fuel. Because we use diesel to heat the water. However, it takes longer to do, but we're creating holistic environmental gardening jobs. And gardening jobs is local economy. So there's an increase in budget required to employ people to be good stewards of the landscape, rather than a lowering of the budget to employ chemicals to leave toxins in the ground and in the environment, and therefore sending the profits to the chemical companies rather than leaving the money in the local economy. So the world needs more gardeners, and that's where holistic vegetation management really starts to take hold. As far as cost goes, well, it costs more, but so do electric vehicles, solar panels, seat belts in cars. But we're talking about safety and ecology, and removing all the negative effects that chemicals and chemical weed control leave us with.
Yeah, this really feels to me like a conversation about externalities. Really, the reality for me, like, it seems to me that with the very narrow focus, like, there is a weed there, get rid of it point of view, then, herbicide up front looks cost effective, but as soon as we take a bigger picture and are like, what are those externalities, or do we actually want to fix this site up long term and rehabilitate it, then I can see the potential where this might flip around and be like and be able to stack up against it is what the potential that I see, and what I would hope to see when I get a chance to see more sites like this over time. So
there's quite a number of councils that have now moved to non-chemical vegetation, and there's a number of reasons for that. One of them is because they only need for one lawsuit to flip the cost benefit between the extra that they would pay to have people trained to do either steam weed control or non-chemical weed control,
Yep.
as to oppose the risk associated with an off-target or contamination event that happens with chemical weed control.
Sure.
And there are examples of that happening here in Australia, in Western Australia, and across Europe.
Okay.
So that's just one of the risks that they can avoid. So, and it's really easy to flip the cost over when you take into account those externalities.
It's that change between that narrow, there's a weed, get rid of it,
Yes.
or this big picture, what are we
Absolutely.
trying to achieve, and
Yeah.
what is the world that we're living
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
discussion. Okay. Is there anything else that you feel that we should know about this that we haven't talked about? So we've talked about like a bit about application process here, a bit about how this works, a bit about cost. Are there any angles that we haven't touched off on here that you think are worth going into?
Employment opportunities.
Okay.
Because there is well, until recently we had Green Corps.
Okay.
Was an ideal opportunity for creating green jobs, getting more people involved in being stewards of the landscape.
Okay.
That's really what we're talking about here. If we've got a space, nature's going to want to fill it, which
Yep.
is about vegetation, it's about management. And anybody who is a gardener knows the satisfaction that you can get from a day's work of being able to come in and improve the presentation of an area.
Yep.
By managing vegetation. So there is a real opportunity to be able to create more jobs that have less occupational health and safety issues, because we've removed the chemical side of that of current practice.
Gotcha. Okay. I like it. Well, look, thank you for one coming out here today, letting me come out, have a look at what you guys do. I really appreciate it. I hope to see more of this stuff. I'll ask you off camera about where can I stalk some sites in Queensland to watch this over time. But I'll ask you that in a second. So thank you for taking the time to have a chat. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for looking us up, Jack. I appreciate it.
No worries. And thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Before you go, our best episodes come from your questions. This knowledge base, these discussions that are Ideanthro improve with your contribution. So if there's a topic, an idea, a concept that you would like us to explore, come and ask us. You know where to find us. www.ideanthro.com/contact. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and that place you get your good podcasts from. You know where to find us. We look forward to hearing from you. We'll see you soon.